They said someone must have forgotten to unlock the kitchen door. But I know a locked door when I feel one. I stood there, tray in hand, listening to my daughter walk down the aisle. My name wasn't called. My seat stayed empty. And taped to the fridge, under the catering schedule, was the guest list. No mother of the bride. But I saw hers. The other woman. Highlighted in gold. I wiped my lipstick off the name tag, set it down on the plastic tray. That's fine. The judge can talk now. I used to think silence was peace. But it was just the absence of being asked. My mornings started before the sun. Always had. A small kitchen light. The smell of cinnamon toast. I'd hum old wedding songs while mixing batter. Not because anyone asked, just because that's what mothers do. I never remarried. Not after David. He left quietly like a light bulb dying. No drama. Just a new toothbrush in his travel bag one day. And then a lawyer letter 2 weeks later. I didn't cry. Not even once. My daughter needed a calm place. So I folded the pain like laundry. Tucked it into closets. Smiled when her braces came off. Clapped loudest at every recital. When she got engaged, she barely finished the sentence before I hugged her. I still remember the ring. Tiny, delicate. Looked like it didn't know it was supposed to mean forever. She said she wanted something small. Family-focused. Simple. Real. I told her that sounded beautiful. And I meant it. I offered to sew her dress. She laughed. Oh, Mom. That's sweet, but we're going modern. I smiled. Of course. I offered to make the cake. We already booked someone, she said, not looking up from her phone. So I offered to pay the deposit. She sent me a link. No, thank you. No call. Just a link. And still I made a binder. Printed flower arrangements, table settings, family recipes. She never asked for it. I placed it gently on her kitchen counter. It stayed there for weeks, untouched. The bridal shower came. I waited all day, thinking someone might call, say, "We forgot to send your invite." They didn't. A neighbor mentioned it offhand, how lovely the theme was. I nodded. She deserves lovely. One evening, I brought over her old veil. The one I'd worn. Hand-stitched by my mother. Just in case, I said. She took it without a word. I never saw it again. I found out later she wore a new one. Designer. Imported. But that's okay. Tradition doesn't mean much when you're trying not to be your mother. Sometimes, I wondered if she was embarrassed by me. By my old shoes. My slow walk. My way of asking too softly and too often. But then I'd remember. When she broke her arm at 7, she wouldn't let the nurse touch her until I kissed her forehead. When her first boyfriend dumped her, she crawled into bed with me, sobbing into my nightgown. When she got the job offer in another city, she cried in the parking lot, saying, "It won't feel like home without you." So no, she loved me once. I know she did. The night before the wedding, I ironed my dress 3 times. It wasn't new, but it was clean. Soft blue. The kind of color that doesn't demand attention, just waits to be noticed. I baked strawberry tarts, the same kind I used to pack in her lunchbox. Wrapped them carefully, tied them with ribbon, labeled them, for the after party. I arrived early, smiled at the planner, nodded at the staff, slipped quietly into the kitchen, where they said I could help just until guests arrive. I didn't mind. I wanted to be useful. I placed the tarts on a silver tray, set them down gently beside macarons and fondant roses. The kitchen was humming. Everyone moving, busy, loud. But in my corner, it was quiet. And that's when I saw it, taped above the prep sink. The guest list. Printed. Checked. Annotated. Her father's new wife? VIP section. Her college roommate's aunt? Preferred table. Even the DJ had a seat. But me? No name. No chair. I stood there, hands still dusted with powdered sugar. Looking for a mistake. A misprint. A joke. There wasn't one. I was never truly lonely. Just quietly replaced. I took off my heels. Set them under the steel counter. And sat on a milk crate. The humming in the kitchen got louder. Someone yelled for more champagne flutes. Someone else asked, "Where's the mother of the bride?" No one answered. No one thought to check the kitchen. I looked down at my name tag. It said dessert support. Not even mother. And just for a moment, I let myself cry. Not loud. Not broken. Just 2 tears like something slipping out of a cracked jar. I wiped them before they dried. Adjusted my apron. And stood up. Because even a forgotten woman can still unlock a few doors. Even if they never meant to leave her behind. Especially then. The moment didn't crash into me. It crept, like the cold draft from an open window you didn't know was there, until your hands start to ache. I was slicing strawberries when the planner came in. She barely looked at me. "Someone checked the fridge for the vendor notes," she barked. I reached over to help. Habit. Mother muscle. Taped to the fridge was a sheet, slightly crooked, like someone had slapped it on in a hurry. Typed names. Color-coded rows. Guest list final. I scanned it like I wasn't scanning, just pretending to check for vendor notes. But my eyes caught it. Vendor. Overlap. My breath stopped. That's the kind of line that erases a person. Not by fire, but by font. Her name. The woman from the bakery. The one I once caught feeding my daughter cookies in the back of David's car. She smiled too much. Talked too loud. Called me sweetheart, like it was an insult in a sugar coat. I hadn't seen her in years. But there she was. Gold star next to her name. I didn't say anything. Didn't breathe, really. Just turned back toward the counter. Finished slicing the strawberries. Placed them on the tray like nothing inside me was breaking. Someone brushed past me. Laughed about the champagne shortage. I nodded. Smiled. But I didn't hear them. Because something else was pulling at me. A shimmer beneath the fridge. Metal catching light. I knelt slowly. Reached down. Pulled it out. A locket. Silver. Dented on the edge, like it had been stepped on. I knew that locket. It used to sit on my nightstand, beside a lavender sachet and a stack of bedtime stories. It was mine. Until I gave it to her. Her 10th birthday. Inside, I'd placed a picture, her in pigtails, missing teeth, icing on her nose. She wore it for years. Even into high school. Said it was her invisible armor. I opened it. Hinge squeaked. The picture was gone. In its place, a tiny gold monogram, D+L. Their initials. Deborah and David. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't drop it. I just closed it and sat back against the wall. The room was silent, but everything inside me was screaming. I remembered her voice as a girl. I never want to forget who loves me. She used to whisper that before bed. Now I sat on a cold tile floor, locket in hand. Forgotten. No chair at the ceremony. No mother of the bride toast. Just my name. Deleted. The chef called out orders. The oven dinged. Life went on. But something inside me shifted. Like a door. Once propped open. Finally shutting. Not slammed. Just quietly closed. I stood up. Tucked the locket in my pocket. Wiped powdered sugar from my wrist. And smiled. Not because I was okay. But because I finally understood. They didn't forget me. They removed me. On purpose. I'd been erased. One RSVP at a time. And now, I was done waiting for someone to write me back in. It didn't start with the guest list. Or the kitchen. Or the locket. It started long before that. In tiny cuts. Too small to scream about. Too polite to name. There was the first time she said, "We're doing something low-key. No need for big family dinners anymore." And I canceled the Sunday roast. The one I'd made for 20 years. Just in case. There was the time I offered to help pack her apartment. She said, "We've got it, Mom." Then posted photos of her, David, and Deborah, carrying boxes and laughing in the driveway. I remember standing in my own kitchen, looking at the same casserole I'd made for her as a baby. It sat untouched. I scraped it into the trash before it cooled. There was the dress. I spent 2 weeks sewing it. Soft ivory silk, tiny pearl buttons down the back. I left it on her porch with a note. "If you want something made by hands that held you." 3 days later, it came back. Unopened. A sticky note on top. Wrong shade. But thank you. I didn't call. Didn't ask why. I just folded the fabric back into the closet. Pressed it down under old linens. There was the phone call where she asked me not to wear navy. Deborah already picked navy. I bit my tongue. Said, "Of course." Hung up. And crossed out my only good dress. There was the time I showed up with lemon bars. Just like she used to beg for. She smiled, took them politely. But later, I found them untouched. Still wrapped, behind a vase in the back corner. I told myself it was the stress. The wedding. The noise. That maybe she just didn't have the words for thank you anymore. There was the group text about the rehearsal dinner. I saw my name, but no details. I replied, "What time?" No one answered. I ended up sitting outside in my car that night. In case someone needed me. No one did. Flashback. Her in braces, asking me to sleep beside her after a nightmare. Me braiding her hair for the school play. She once told her class I was her favorite person in the whole world. Now she sent one-word replies. Cool. Yeah. Okay. And I made excuses. She's busy. She's growing. She still loves me. One night, I walked past her Instagram. Not on purpose. Just curious. Photos of cake tastings. Bridal fittings. A caption. Couldn't do it without my real family. Deborah's arm around her waist. David smiling beside them. My name was never in the tags. That was when I stopped checking. Stopped trying to fix a wound that didn't want healing. Stopped baking her favorites. Stopped leaving flowers on her porch. Stopped pretending I wasn't being slowly ghosted by my own blood. There was the birthday card I mailed. Handwritten. Long. Tender. No reply. 2 weeks later, she posted a photo. Holding up a card from Deborah. Caption said, "She always knows what to say." I sat at my kitchen table. Watched the shadows move across the wall. And I let myself feel it. Not the big hurt. Just the small ones. The ones you swallow. Until you forget what full feels like. There were good moments, too. Don't get me wrong. Like when she sent a photo of her bouquet options. No caption, no context. But it was something. I replied, "The blush ones are soft. Timeless." She heart-reacted. Didn't say anything else. But I saved that screenshot. Because scraps matter. When you've been on a hunger diet of love. I told myself she was overwhelmed. That the wedding fog would lift. That my girl, the one who kissed my forehead every morning until she was 9, would come back. But the truth is, she had already gone. And I was clinging to the echo of someone who had stopped calling me home. Visuals. So many. The unopened gift box in her driveway. The rejected dress. The returned lemon bars. A voicemail never played. My name scribbled out on an envelope. Rewritten in her fiancé's sharp handwriting. But the worst one? The dinner table. One night, just after Christmas. We sat in silence. I asked about colors, flowers, song choices. She barely looked up. Just said, "Deborah's handling most of that." And then she added, softly, but not kindly, "It's just easier that way." I smiled, excused myself to the kitchen, and cried into a dish rag. The dish rag I used when she had chicken pox. The same one I used to wipe her tears when the goldfish died. Funny how things circle back. I used to say she was my greatest masterpiece. Now I wasn't even allowed to sign my name in the corner. The little hurts? They were never little. They just whispered. Until they screamed. The kitchen was warm, but I felt cold. That kind of cold that comes from the inside out. Not from air, but from absence. I sat on a milk crate, back against the wall. Apron stained with butter and berry juice. Hands still trembling from the locket. The guest list ran through my head like a song stuck on repeat. Not just that I was missing, but that someone wrote it, checked it, printed it, and no one noticed. No one stopped it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the lipstick name tag. Dessert support. In red ink. Peeling at the corner. It stuck to my fingers when I tried to throw it away. So I just set it on the tray beside the broken tart. That tart. I remade it 3 times. Because the first one cracked. The second one burned. And the third was perfect. It was supposed to be her favorite. Strawberry cream with vanilla lace. Now it sat next to a name tag that didn't belong to a mother. Just a helper. The music started upstairs. The wedding march. Muted through walls and air vents. I froze. Not from shock, but from the weight of it. My daughter was walking toward a future I would not be in. And I was holding a tart. I closed my eyes. And suddenly I was 27 again. Holding her in the hospital. Her tiny fingers wrapping around mine like ribbon. She had more hair than the nurses expected. Black curls, soft as silence. I remember the first night home. She cried for 3 hours. I held her, rocked her, sang every lullaby I knew. And then suddenly she stopped. Looked up. Stared at me like I was the only thing in the world she recognized. That moment had lived inside me for decades. A quiet little seed of certainty. She loves me. She will always love me. And now, she was up there, walking toward something new. And I wasn't even on the program. My throat tightened, but no sound came out. Just breath. Slow. Thin. Like I was learning how to survive without sound. I opened my eyes and looked around the kitchen. There was a clock. It had a grease stain across the face. But the second hand was still ticking. Just like always. Time didn't care who was missing. It just moved. I reached down and untied my apron. Fingers slow. Careful. like I was undoing more than a knot. I placed the apron on the counter. Folded. Neat. And I looked again at the tray of tarts. The third one. The perfect one. I picked it up. Carried it outside. Around the back. Past the dumpsters. Into the alley. There was no wind. No noise. Just me and the tart. I sat down on a step and took a bite. It tasted like childhood. Like something I made in a yellow kitchen. With a baby on my hip. It tasted like memories. Like the things no one else knew I gave up. And then I dropped the rest of it in the trash. Not out of anger. Just surrender. I wiped my hands on my dress. Stood. And whispered. Enough. Empty. Forgotten. Perfect. Words I had carried like pearls strung too tight. I walked back inside. No one noticed. No one asked. They were laughing. Clinking glasses. Pouring champagne. I moved through them like smoke. Present but unheld. In the hallway, I passed a photo board. Pictures of her life. Her childhood. Graduation. The engagement. Not one photo of me. Not one. But there, tucked in the corner, was a photo I hadn't seen in years. A blurry shot of David holding her as a baby. And next to him, Deborah. Already there. Already touching the future that once belonged to me. I stared at it. At the past pretending to be truth. Have you ever remembered something small? Just when everything felt like it was falling apart. I remembered the time I caught David whispering on the phone late at night. He said it was a client, but he never took calls in the dark before. I remembered the bakery napkin in his jacket pocket. Lipstick stain. Not mine. I remembered the time my daughter asked me, "Do you think some people just forget how to love the same person forever?" I thought she meant her boyfriend. Now I wonder if she meant me. I left the hallway. Found the staff bathroom. Washed my hands until they stopped shaking. And I looked in the mirror. Not to fix my face, but to remember it. I needed to see the woman they were trying to erase. The one who stayed. Who cooked. Who forgave. Who loved without making it a performance. And I whispered to her, "You're still here." And she whispered back, "Not for long." I didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. Didn't make a scene. They would have expected that. Would have loved it even. To say I was emotional. Unstable. Making everything about me. But I've learned that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the only way. To let them hear themselves. So I walked out. Out the kitchen. Out the hallway. Out the house. Nobody stopped me. Nobody noticed. The door closed behind me without a sound. Not a slam. Not a click. Just a hush, like a breath held too long. Finally released. It was raining lightly. The kind of rain that doesn't wet you. Just reminds you you're alive. I walked to my car. Parked under a drooping pine. Opened the door. Sat down. And I didn't cry. I took off my shoes. The ones I bought for this day. Simple. Soft. Not that anyone saw them. And I sat there barefoot. Dress rumpled. Locket cold in my pocket. The engine started. But I didn't drive. Just let the radio hum. Until the air felt full again. It was quiet power. Not the kind that takes. The kind that releases. I drove home. Past the street with the white gazebo. The one where she rode her tricycle. Past the bakery where I once saw Deborah laughing. Into my husband's collarbone. I turned off the music. Rolled down the window. Let the night touch me. By the time I reached the house, something had shifted. Not broken. Not lost. Just returned. Me. I stepped inside. Kicked off the shoes. And went straight to the desk drawer. Pulled out the navy envelope I hadn't opened in years. Inside, the deed. To my grandmother's house. The one I bought back after the divorce. Paid in full. Kept in my name. She thought it was a wedding gift. But I'd never signed the transfer form. Never notarized it. She'd thanked me in a text. I never replied. Because it wasn't a gift. It was a test. And she failed it. I looked at the blank form beside the deed. Then folded them both. Slipped them into a manila envelope. Wrote one word on the front. Return. The next morning, I walked into the bank. The teller smiled like she didn't know. I'd been erased from a wedding. "Safe deposit, please," I said. She opened the vault. I placed the deed inside. Shut it. Turned the key. Then asked to close the joint account I shared with my daughter. She looked confused, but processed it quietly. I walked out lighter. Not because I lost anything, but because I finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine. That afternoon, I went to the mailbox. Pulled out the photo frame. It was the one from the hallway. My daughter in white. Her father beside her. Deborah smiling like a thief with clean hands. I took it inside, removed the photo, burned it over the sink, watched the corners curl into nothing. Then I cleaned the frame, placed something new inside. A dried daisy, from a bouquet she gave me when she was 6. Before forgetting was easier. I set it back on the shelf. That was the silent scene. No words, no drama, just one memory replaced. One flame, one choice. I didn't call her, didn't write, didn't explain, because power doesn't need proof. It just needs peace. I changed my voicemail. New tone, new name, removed mother of the bride, replaced it with something older, my grandmother's name. Evelyn Hart, a name no one had claimed in 2 generations. Until now. That evening I brewed tea, lavender and honey, sat by the window, watched the world not end. And I thought, have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace? Then one day realized, you were the peace all along. It came quiet, not like a knock, more like a ripple, that reached the shore days after the storm. 3 days after the wedding, I got a voicemail from David. I hadn't heard his voice in almost a year. Hi, listen, there's been some confusion with the venue balance. I think there's a mistake with the account routing you gave for the payment. Give me a call. We need to clear this up before they pursue legal channels. Legal channels. Funny how a man who left me with a typed-up goodbye now suddenly remembered how to ask. I didn't call back, but I did open my drawer. Inside was the wedding file I'd kept for my own records. Receipts. Account slips. 2 checks I had written months ago. One canceled. One never mailed. I flipped to the back. Found the deed papers. One copy was missing. I knew I hadn't removed it. I never touched that folder after the bridal rejection came. So I looked deeper. Tucked behind an envelope labeled guest list duplicate was a scanned document. Forged signature. Mine. Sloppy, but close. I knew my own name like I knew the creases of my daughter's hand. And this? This was a lie wearing my face. It was a property pledge form, backing the venue deposit with my house. My grandmother's house. Signed not by me, but by someone pretending. I sat down slowly, not because I was dizzy, but because the ground beneath everything I gave had just quietly vanished. There was a second page, a note attached in digital print. From her email. My daughters. My mother is supportive of this arrangement. She's old-fashioned and prefers to keep things off the record, but she approves the use of her property as backing. Please proceed. I read that sentence 6 times. Not for clarity, but for heartbreak. She knew. She knew. This wasn't a daughter caught in a whirlwind. This was a choice. A paper trail of betrayal. Legal. Intentional. Sharp. And the signature? Not even her doing. It had David's handwriting all over it. The same curves he used when signing her recital notes as Dad. The same pen that wrote me out of my own story. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I got up. Walked to the hallway. Opened the safe. Inside, still where I'd left it, was the original deed. The real one. Signed. Stamped. Secure. Still mine. They didn't have the right paper. But they'd tried to use my name like a doormat. And that was the betrayal deeper than silence. Deeper than disinviting me. Deeper than erasing a photo. They tried to spend me. Spend my history. My roof. My memory. My bloodline. To fund a wedding I served desserts at. In shoes I never got to dance in. I sat back down. Took the locket from my coat pocket. Opened it again. Still the monogram inside. D+L. But this time I noticed something else. The photo slot had been forced. Bent. As if the original picture didn't slide out. It was ripped. I remembered what was in it. The day she learned to ride a bike. Me behind her. Arms out. Catching her if she fell. She loved that photo. Said it made her feel brave. Now it was gone. Replaced with 2 initials. That meant nothing. But theft. I took the locket into the garden. Dug in the soft soil under the lilies. Planted it. Like a bone. Like a secret. Because some things aren't meant to be worn. They're meant to be buried. They didn't just forget me. They erased me. I whispered it out loud. Not for pity. For proof. And in that garden silence, I realized something else. It wasn't just about the house. Or the dress. Or the photo. It was about history. Mine. My mother's. Her mother's. That house, my grandmother's. Had survived wars. Debt. Widowhood. Miscarriages. Births. Laughter. Grief. And now my daughter Had tried to pawn it for a venue. With fairy lights and Instagram walls. For what? A day of pretending? She didn't just forget me. She forgot where she came from. Who made her? Who fed her? Stitched her? Covered her while she slept? I looked down at my hands. Still dusted with flour from 3 days ago. Still cracked from cleaning up a party I wasn't invited to. They took my hands. Used them. Then crossed my name off the list. But the house? Still mine. The deed? Still untouched. The paper in the bank vault was worth more than any apology. They'd come asking for later. Because now, I wasn't holding on to it for her. I was holding it to keep her out. I didn't tell anyone. Not the bank. Not my neighbor. Not even the lawyer I quietly consulted on a Thursday morning while the bread was rising. Because this time, I didn't want protection. I wanted clarity. The property was mine. Still. Always. Even when they tried to sell the story without the spine. But I didn't want it anymore. Not because it wasn't sacred, but because they had tried to stain it. And I didn't want to walk through those rooms, wondering where their shadows still lingered. I wanted a home that didn't carry betrayal in the wallpaper. So I made a new choice. One nobody could predict. I donated it. Not to spite them. Not to win. But to free myself from being the vault. They kept trying to crack open. There was a women's shelter across town. A small one, run by 2 sisters and a retired school counselor. They were saving up for a bigger space. Had been for years. I walked in on a Tuesday with the deed in an envelope. Asked if they accepted property donations. They blinked. Offered me coffee. Assumed I was confused. Until I handed over the folder. With everything signed and sealed. No conditions. No tax loopholes. Just one sentence. This house raised strong women. Let it keep doing that. The counselor cried. The younger sister asked if she could hug me. I said yes. It was the first time in weeks someone touched me. Without needing something from me. Later that night, I sat on the porch. Of my new apartment. A 1-bedroom rental near the water. Smaller. Simpler. Mine. No ghosts. No heirlooms hanging heavy in the air. I brewed lavender tea. Opened the window. And took out the locket. For a while I just stared at it. Not in grief anymore. But in decision. I opened it. Removed the monogram. D+L. Thin, worn, like something fake pretending to last. In its place, I pressed a daisy. Dried, flat, delicate. It had been tucked in an old photo album. A bouquet my daughter once made in kindergarten. She handed it to me with glue still wet on the stems. Said, I picked the ones that look like you. That memory stayed. Even if she didn't. I snapped the locket shut. Slid it around my neck. This time, it didn't feel like armor. It felt like truth. The next morning, I changed my name. Legally. Officially. Formally. Not back to my maiden name. But further. Back to my grandmother's. Evelyn Hart. A woman who survived the Dust Bowl. Birthed 5 children. Buried 2. Never took a loan she couldn't repay. She used to say, don't put your name on something. Unless you're proud of what it holds. I thought about that as I signed the papers. Felt something inside me rise again. Not anger. Not sadness. But a grounded kind of knowing. Later that week, I boxed up every trace of the wedding. The dress I ironed? Donated. The returned lemon bars note? Shredded. The lipstick name tag? Burned slowly. Like a ceremony. And the voicemail from David? Deleted. Not because I forgave him, but because I no longer needed the proof. Of what I already knew. I planted new flowers in the community garden near my apartment. Lilies. And 1 row of daisies. For no one but me. And I gave away something sacred, too. A quilt. Stitched from pieces of my old kitchen aprons. Baby blankets. 1 square from the hem of her childhood dress. I mailed it to the shelter. With a note. For the first woman who needs to feel held. It was the only thing I gave away. Without losing anything. Because strength doesn't mean holding tighter. Sometimes it means knowing when to release. Sometimes you don't need justice. Just a garden. And a name you chose yourself. Viewer reflection. Would you have walked away or taken everything back? For me, walking away was taking it back. It started with an envelope. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. Slanted, rushed. Like guilt on paper. Inside was a photo. Her. My daughter. In her wedding gown. Not the photo itself that shook me. But the caption she'd written in the corner. I should have looked for you. No apology. No explanation. Just 7 words. Spilling too late. A week passed. Then a knock at my door. Not urgent. Not timid. Just waiting. I opened it. She stood there. No mascara. No bouquet. No audience. Just the same girl. Who once asked me why thunder sounded like the sky was crying. But she wasn't a girl now. She was a woman. Carrying a silence. Even she didn't know what to do with. Can I come in? Her voice. Small. I stepped aside. Didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just moved. She sat on the couch. Hands clenched like prayer. Or guilt. Or both. I didn't know what Dad was doing with the house, she started. I didn't know he forged anything. I watched her carefully. Not for lies. For language. She didn't say. I'm sorry. She said. I didn't know. She looked older. Heavier in the eyes. Wearing a cardigan I didn't recognize. It looked like Deborah's. I wanted you there. I did. I nodded. Not because I believed it, but because nodding is easier than rage. And the guest list. She stopped. Bit her lip. There were too many people trying to take over. I should have stopped it. I just thought. Maybe keeping the peace meant letting things go. That's the thing about peace. It doesn't survive when it's built on erasing someone else. She reached into her bag. Pulled out the locket. I had buried it. But clearly, someone had found it. She placed it on the table. Like she was returning something she stole. I opened it. She paused. There was a daisy inside. I said nothing. I kept it after you gave it to me. Even when Dad said it looked cheap. I didn't want to take the picture out. Deborah did. There it was. The name. Deborah. A gust of wind through a long-closed room. She left, my daughter whispered. Dad and her, it didn't last. She took some money. Said I'd leaned on her too much. That I wasn't her daughter. I watched her unravel. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I wanted her to see what she had done. To me. She looked up. Eyes glossy. I don't have anyone left. I sipped my tea. Lavender. Still warm. There's a difference, I said slowly, between losing people and letting go of the ones you threw away. She flinched, but didn't look away. I stood, walked to the window, let the quiet stretch between us, until it felt like a truth we both had to sit inside. Why didn't you come back sooner? I asked finally. No accusation. Just question. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, because I thought you'd never forgive me. I turned, met her eyes. I already did. The day I stopped waiting. She cried then. Real tears. Not loud. Not messy. Just soft. But I didn't reach for her. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean return. And love doesn't always mean reunion. I walked to the entryway. Opened the door. She stood slowly. Looked like she might ask, "Can I come back?" But she didn't. She just nodded. Like she understood. I didn't hug her. Didn't kiss her cheek. Didn't say, "I love you anyway." That used to be my line. But not anymore. She stepped outside. Paused. Turned back. Mom. I waited. I think I miss you more now. Because I finally see you. I nodded once. Just once. Then closed the door. Not slammed. Not locked. Just closed. The locket sat untouched on the table. But I didn't open it. Not again. I walked to the phone. Listened to the blinking voicemail light. David. Again. I hit delete. Let the silence take his voice. The way he once took my name from the wedding speech. For a moment, I pitied them both. Then I remembered who I was. Do you believe quiet dignity is stronger than revenge? Because I do. And this silence, it wasn't the absence of pain. It was the sound of power. Finally coming home. There was no closure. Not in the way movies promise. No swelling music. No final embrace. Just mornings that started quietly. Nights that didn't ache as much. And space. Real breathing space. That no one else controlled. I didn't hear from her again. Not for a long time. Maybe she thought silence meant I was still angry. Maybe she finally understood. That silence was the only thing I was ever allowed to keep. But I wasn't waiting anymore. Not to be remembered. Not to be invited. Not to be rewritten into someone else's highlight reel. I woke early. Fed the garden. Tended the daisies. And with every soft petal that bloomed, something in me loosened. The world didn't need to apologize for moving on without me. And I didn't need to beg to belong again. One afternoon, I returned to the shelter. Not with papers this time, but with bread. Warm. Wrapped in linen. The way my grandmother used to bring it to grieving neighbors. They smiled. Let me sit for a while. We didn't talk about what I'd given them. We talked about what we'd all lost, and what we were still capable of growing. On my way home, I took the long route, through the neighborhood where my daughter used to ride her bike, past the playground she once called her kingdom. I didn't cry. I didn't stop. I just watched the swing set move in the wind, empty but still rocking. That night, I opened my memory box, the one I had locked years ago. Inside, a tiny sock from her first winter, a scribbled note that said, "Mommy, you're my sunshine," and the original photo, that once lived in the locket, the one she ripped out, the one I almost forgot. She was 6 in that picture, wobbly on a bicycle, me behind her, arms out, ready to catch her. I stared at it for a long time, then slid it into a new frame, one without silver or shine, just wood, soft edges, like the ones I used to sand down by hand. I placed it beside the window, let it sit in the light. I didn't do it to remember. I did it to release. Because peace, real peace, doesn't ask for permission. It just begins, quietly, on a Tuesday, with a cup of tea and no reason to answer the phone. Weeks passed, then months. The house stayed quiet, but it never felt empty. Sometimes the wind moved through the screens, just right, and I swore I could hear my grandmother humming. I found the chair one afternoon, the one I used to avoid sitting in. Too fancy, too full of memories. But that day, I dusted it off, sat down, folded a blanket over my knees, and for the first time in years, I didn't brace for noise. I welcomed the stillness. I held the locket in one hand, felt the daisy press against my skin, and I whispered. I was never the echo. I was the voice they tried to silence. Outside, the lilies bent with the wind, not breaking, just moving. I dropped the spare key, the one I never gave anyone, into the river that ran behind the apartment garden. Watched it disappear. Not a funeral, a baptism. The key I never gave became the one that freed me.